Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to ITHive.org's live tech show. And I realize it might not be good morning for you, depending on where you're watching, when you're watching, but here we are. This show, we have a few things to talk about today on the agenda. And if you have questions or suggestions or anything like that, chime in during the call. We'll make it live, and we'll see what we can do. Might not be able to answer all questions right then and there, but we'll definitely do a follow-up segment on a show, or we'll do our best. All right. So for this week, so we're on episode 35, and I wanted to talk a little bit about security and what's going on out there, and also quality of time, right? What people get caught in, and what traps people get caught in, and why, right? So a couple of things. So on the security front, there's still a big trend these days, and we've talked about this before on the show, is that we have on our networks, whether you're a business or residential, there's a box that, sometimes provided by your ISP or your internet service provider, or you go and you buy one. It's called a router, right? So very simple for most people's experience. Like, oh, well, this box just gives me internet access and allows my computers to talk to each other when I'm at home on local network, provides me Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, what happens is that these devices, these routers, right, are configured and sold so that you come home, you plug them in, and then everything just magically works, right? Is that good enough? Well, unfortunately, for us to function and do things, a lot of people, hey, works, no issue. And as I've mentioned before on the show, that just because your technology is working doesn't mean it's not broken. So what's happening out there in the world right now is that attackers are figuring out that, okay, hey, a lot of these routers that are on the internet, which is essentially a device that should be protecting what you have on your local network from attacks in the wild, right? It's your front-facing device. It's basically your door on your house or your door on your business in terms of internet. So imagine if you bought just to do an analogy, if you bought a door with a lock and everything from the hardware store, and you installed it in your house or in your business and whatnot, and it worked. It opens and it shuts. It lets people in, lets people out. No big deal, right? So, and then you just left it there. No, we wouldn't do that, right? We would make sure it's locked, and we would make sure the doors, and we would maintain the door over time. Well, your router is the same thing, okay? There's software in there. It needs to be updated. There's settings in there. They need to be right, okay? And the challenge always with security and technology is that the more secure you make stuff, the more complicated things become, right? And sure, you achieve security, right? But then there's downsides to ease of use and functionality and all that stuff. So what's happening, unfortunately, is we're more leaning on the side of just having things work. And attackers and the crooks out there on the internet are getting wind of this. So they're exploiting vulnerabilities in routers now, using your internet connection to launch attacks on others, using a redirection. There's all kinds of things. So I think that this is something that should not be overlooked, right? And very simple, what I would recommend for your router is make sure it's up to date, okay? Make sure that you change the password on it, right? Because it's astonishing. You know, I work with clients and or with you know, someone I've never worked with before, and it takes me in all cases, you know, about 5 minutes to access the router without me knowing anything, because most people don't do anything. So I know, you know, a lot of times the user ID and the password is admin and password, or admin and admin, so on and so on. So these things, you know, in some cases, this isn't so bad, right? I've seen some internet service providers actually be a little more proactive and set these things up properly, at least for their clients. But it is something that should be checked. It should be on a checklist, and it should be checked regularly to make sure it's up to date and to make sure there's no vulnerabilities. Okay. We're currently working on something, a checklist for a router that we can go through and just add that as part of our service offering for our customers, because that's what we do. Okay, so this is a big thing now, right? This is the latest and greatest. It's happening today. And so that's something that needs to be watched out for. Another thing, this is kind of interesting and somewhat scary, okay? So everybody's big on the voice assistants. You know, this is a big thing. We're getting, like, you know, speakers from Amazon and Google that we can talk to, and they will do things for us like voice assistants and stuff like that. But here's another thing. So attackers can trick these voice assistants actually into, they can embed sound-alike triggers, and I can't think of examples, but basically you'll say something, right, and the software will interpret it a certain way and then do something else. So, you know, it's another thing. It's another security issue that I'm sure will be addressed, but it's something that's worth mentioning, and something that for people to understand. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of voice assistants at this point in time. I think that, you know, well, I do it on my phone, I guess, right? But, you know, as far as having a device to just do that, I don't know. I'm not there yet. I don't see the value yet. And of course, you know, sometimes when we have new technology, there's issues that come about with this technology, and they haven't quite been worked out, right? So, you know, there's been stories where certain voice assistants are actually listening to what you're saying, and then misusing that data. So, you know, that's something to be concerned with and aware of, right? So that's kind of something that needs to be talked about and brought out in the open, and then we, you know, deal with that. So for me, not yet, right? So, you know, and with this whole thing, I just got to, since we're talking about, you know, privacy and data and what companies do with our data, you know, just to reiterate, I'm pretty liberal with that. You know, I share stuff. I'm pretty visible on the internet and whatnot, and I don't mind so much. Where I draw the line, of course, is when my information and my data is used inappropriately to annoy me, I guess would be the best way to say, right? I'm okay with my use of data actually adding to the quality of my life, but when it is trying to shove things or show me things that really I would not be interested in, right? And they're just trying to, you know, manipulate me into buying something that I would never buy, well, then it's a little bit of an issue. So just a point on that front. And so let's see. Oh yeah, so quality of life. So a couple of things on this. Um, you know, I've had some issues with, for some reason, the latest version of Windows, and I don't know if it's related to a certain update or if it's just been coincidental. But I've had now 4 cases where people have lost their internet services or their networking services on their computer. And luckily in Windows 10, there's an easy way to fix that. You just reset your network connection and it gets fixed. But why is this happening? As far as I can tell, the ones I've dealt with have been a result of a machine suddenly being abruptly shut off. Okay, and in all cases except for one, a quick network reset has been done, and we can fix it. But there's something happening here because I can't imagine, and as I was thinking about this yesterday, that this happens from time to time. I always tell my customers to be very careful about your computer abruptly shutting off because you can damage the operating system. And so that's a message I constantly deliver. But I know also that it happens. Now, so why all of a sudden is there this trend, right? So I don't know if there's something that's different in the internals, in the networking software that Windows 10 has got, that is causing a problem. I'm not sure, but I continue to investigate. I can't see a pattern, right? For the most part, we're getting it fixed. But just the message here: never, ever, ever abruptly shut off your computer unless it's stuck. It's not doing anything. Okay. But if you can shut it off properly, from the Windows button and just say shut down, that's the best way to do that. Any other way, you're going to cause damage and hurt your system. So, and quick note on that about the, well, maybe we'll leave that one until the end. So another thing about quality of life and time spent, good thing with our phones, right? Personally, I see, the cell phone, the smartphone, is really become a social issue. I'm a tech, right? I do a lot of stuff on tech. But I also, I pride myself on being a little bit human too. And there's just some things that shouldn't be done with cell phones. If you're in company of people, right, you should put the phone away, right? That's kind of a rule that I kind of live with. And, because what you're in company of people, you can't do anything else, right? And what's happening right there with those people, that's happening now, right? And not, anything you can do on your smartphone, you can do that later, right? So, people first, technology next, right? It's a good thing to rule. But one thing I got to say is that moving forward here, Google and other companies now are developing means so you can look at your smartphone and actually understand how much time you're spending on it, and what you're doing and what you're working on, and those kinds of things. So you can look back at your day and say, oh man, I spent 8 hours watching, cat videos today on my phone. And, hopefully that would be a reflection in your quality of life and say, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing that because, I could be doing other things in that 8 hours, right? Very important. So, the good news here is that tools are coming to help us be more aware of what we're doing and how we're using our phones, right? So now I just want to end this off with a little bit. Okay, I'm always a proponent of a computer can last a long time if it was a good investment and whatnot. Now, there's always 2 categories of problems with your computer. There's hardware and software. If you got a software issue, right, I advocate that you fix it and move on, right? Now, hardware issue, that's another story, right? If there's a hardware problem, you got to say, well, is it time to retire the computer, or is it time to, can we fix this and be okay? Now, these are difficult decisions to make because, you go one way or the other, or, whatever you do, right? And it's something I always mention to my customers is that we don't know what will happen tomorrow or the day after or the day after. So we're always making a decision based on what makes the most sense, right? And, you don't know what's going to occur. But I think the thing that a lot of people do is they make rash decisions, right? Without really, thinking clearly about, okay, what's the best approach here and what's the best thing to do. And the one thing I do a lot of the times, if I have a customer, particularly a business, always with the business, right? And they have an older computer and, they may become at a time, maybe we should start looking at replacing that. I'm always a fan of, replacing a computer when an older computer is still in operation, right? And then what you can do is you can take that new computer, make that be your main source of workload and stuff, and take your older one and just keep it in the mix, right? So it can be maintained and managed properly, but use it as a backup, right? Because even if you buy a brand new computer, right, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have a problem, day 3, right? Because, and software is software, right? And you could have a hardware problem too with a new computer. That's quite frankly, but more than likely, sometimes software will bellyache and have an issue, and then you have a problem, right? But if you have 2 systems, if it's warranted, right, you set it up properly, right, and then that way, no matter what happens, you use one or the other, and you're good to go. Good as gold. So, anyway, over the 15 minutes, so I'm going to end it here, and I just want to say, happy computing, happy spend some time outside. Have that balance in life, right? That's all I want to say about that. And we will talk next week at 10 o'clock Eastern on Saturday for another show. And please join us. And like always, if you have any comments or suggestions or anything, just please leave them to me and we'll go from there. All right. Have a great weekend and a great week. And we'll talk to you next Saturday.